It was a sweltering August day in 1839 when an American Navy ship happened upon a schooner named Amistad, drifting off the coast of Long Island, New York. The ship flew a Spanish flag, but when American sailors boarded the boat, they didn't find a Spanish crew. Instead, they found a dead captain and a crew of African mutineers. It turns out they'd been captured in Africa and were on their way to Cuba to be illegally sold into slavery when they revolted and successfully seized the ship from their captors. Not bad. The American Navy officers seized the Amistad, brought it to shore, and promptly imprisoned all the African people on board. That turned out to be a colossal decision. It reignited a heated debate in the U.S. about enslavement that would ultimately end in the outbreak of the Civil War and abolish slavery. The story of the Amistad starts 6 months earlier, in February of 1839, when slave hunters abducted hundreds of people from present-day Sierra Leone, put them on the Amistad, and set sail for Havana, Cuba. But the ship would never reach its destination. That's because one night, after a few days out at sea, a man named Singbei PA managed to free himself and unshackle the rest of his fellow captives. They killed the ship's captain and cook, overpowered the rest of the slave-trading crew, ordering the navigators to turn the ship around and sail back to Africa. But you can never trust a slave trader, and sure enough, the crew secretly changed course in the middle of the night, sailing toward the eastern coast of the United States. By August, the ship finally ran aground off the coast of Long Island. They were spotted, boarded, and ultimately escorted to Connecticut for a court hearing. Singbei PA was charged with murder and piracy, and the rest of his fellow captives turned mutineers were imprisoned, though the charges were all quickly dropped as the story gained more attention. Even still, they were kept behind bars while the court spent months deciding their legal status. Were they free men, or did they belong to the Spanish? The answer seems obvious, yet there were competing opinions. President Martin Van Buren wanted to send them to Cuba, where the slave ship was originally headed, to score political points with the Spanish government. Nice. But others defended the rights of Singbei PA and his crew. A group of abolitionists in the North raised money for their legal defense and argued strongly that they had been illegally captured and were well within their rights to take over the ship. Almost a year after being stolen away from their homeland, the Supreme Court ruled that the Africans had been illegally captured and therefore weren't Spanish slaves and should be returned home. Finally, almost 3 years after the traumatic ordeal began, Singbei PA and the other 34 survivors of the Amistad set sail and returned safely to Africa, ending the whole traumatic ordeal once and for all. Not exactly a happy ending, but maybe more like the start to something larger.